What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another episode of Spice of the Week, where we take a look at some of the most interesting and bizarre lists being played in paper at the moment. Now, if that sounds interesting to you, definitely stick around as we'll be taking a look at three decks that really showcase exactly how unique the play experience can be when playing in paper in our most beloved format. As always, guys, if you would like to support the channel, you can leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate the support. And with that said, let's take a look at the first deck that we're talking about today. And that deck is Bogle's Kate's deck by Amax Miguel. So basically a slippery Bogle deck. Uh, but gates. So it's not something I've actually seen before. So I'm very interested to check out what they brought in their creature pile. They're only bringing 11 creatures, which is, I think, generally one less than what you see often. So I got 4 copies of Glade Cover Scout, 4 Silhana Ledgewalkers, and 4 Slippery Bogles. So all their creatures are hexproof creatures. Surprised they're running one less on the Ledgewalker over Glade Cover Scout, where Ledgewalker does have some evasion. I would probably maybe cut one Scout and bring in the Ledgewalker. Is just going over the top of their creatures can be really good a lot of the times. In their sorcery pile, they brought in 4 Commune with Spirits, which is basically like card draw for the deck. Since you can play this and find an enchantment or a land card if that's what you need. Really good. The deck doesn't really have a lot of ways to gain card advantage in your hand. So usually running 3 to 4 Commune with Spirits has been pretty standard with this archetype. All right, and in their enchantment pile, which is the rest of their spells, is 4 copies of Abundant Growth, 2 All That Glitters, 3 Ancestral Mask, 4 Armadillo Cloaks, 4 Cartouches of Solidarity, 4 Ethereal Armor, and 4 Rancor, and 2 Spirit Link. So surprised that they are not running any more spells that help or any more auras that help fix their mana. I believe there are some others out there. Certainly they cannot be running Utopia Sprawl, as when you run that deck, run that card, you definitely want to be running as many forests as possible. And since they are on a gate build, that card is potentially pretty dead a lot of the time. So let's take a look at their mana base. It's an 18 land build. They got 4 Basilisk Gate, 4 Citadel Gate, 5 forests, 4 Manor Gate, and 1 Plains. A little surprised there's no heap gate, is that's another way to help fix your mana, as well as increasing the gate count for Basilisk Gate, which they can use to pump up their Bogles even more than what they already are. Does seem a little bit like overkill, though it is a very interesting idea, so it's why I kind of wanted to showcase it. Alright, and in their sideboard, it's a pretty standard sideboard for the archetype. We got 2 copies of Flaring Pain, 3 Free Wind Falcons, 3 Gutshot, 3 Standard Bear, and 4 Young Wolf. And if you are interested in trying out this deck, it looks like it's only around $65, so pretty inexpensive as far as pauper decks go. It's kind of in the middle there. And honestly, if you don't mind having a very linear plan, it's a great deck to play. Not going to be very interactive, obviously, but you can, if your opponent does not have an answer for a hexproof creature or enchantments in their main deck, you can really run away with game one, and game two you can kind of see what they got going on and what they might be bringing in to fight you and bring in stuff against them. Obviously, Flaring Pain is going to be really good against anything with protection or anything that's running things like Prismatic Strands, for example. Because they got things for the red decks, things for fairies, things for mirror matches, or going against all that glitters, things that run lots of edicts. So Young Wolf is going to be very good there, and it seems they are already set up to go against those type of spells with running 4 Cartouche of Solidarity, which creates an expendable creature. So that can be very, very good. All in all, it seems like a pretty interesting build. So pretty cool to see someone trying something a little bit different with the Slippery Bogle. And our next deck that we're talking about is Storm. Where it's Is It Storm Goblin by Glubriel. So let's take a look at what they brought. This is definitely very much of a rogue build, but I thought it was pretty interesting. So in their creature pile, they just got 4 creatures. 4 Goblin Electromancers, which this is a card I've been somewhat interested on brewing around. It's not really something you see. I haven't really seen it much in the meta. So yeah, very interesting. That they are running this card, and it's gonna reduce the cost of basically all of their instant and sorcery spells, which is how this deck basically intends to storm off. So let's take a look at what they brought in their sorcery pile. They got 4 copies of Distant Melody, which, if you have a lot of creatures of the same type, can draw you a considerable amount of cards. And then we got 3 copies of Dragon Fodder, 2 Goblin War Party, which kind of seems to be maybe one of the deck's win cons, especially when they have a ton and a ton of goblin tokens out. They can basically give them all +1/+1 in haste. Maybe if they have enough mana to run the entwine cost, they also get 3 more goblins. Um, so yeah, I think they intend to just win out of nowhere by just going very, very wide. And then they got 2 copies of Krenko's Command, and 4 copies of Koldatha Rebirth, and 1 Thoughtcast. And then in their instant pile, they got 4 copies of Brightstone Ritual, which if they've been able to get a bunch of Goblin tokens out, that can create a ton of mana for them. And they got 3 copies of Demand Answers, so more card draw. 4 copies of Manamorphose, which is just an insanely powerful card in the format. 4 copies of Meeting of Minds, which is gonna be pretty crazy when they have some Goblin tokens, as well as having maybe 1 or 2 Electromancers out. It's basically a 0 mana spell. So this is such an amazing card. I play this a lot in my Familiars deck, and I absolutely love it. 1 copies of Rites of Initiation, so another way to kind of go wide against your opponents, but then you're going to have cards in your hand, but then with things like Distant Melody, Meeting of Minds, Thoughtcast, you're probably going to have some cards in your hand to discard. All right, and in their artifact pile, they got 4 Chromatic Stars and 2 copies of Ichor Wellspring. Surprised they're not running a little bit more, as it does add some card draw. It is a very grindy card, but one of my favorite cards in the format. Also, you can sacrifice it to their Demand Answers, which they're also running. Okay, and let's take a look at their mana base. It's a 18 land build. They got 4 copies of Great Furnace, 2 islands, 4 mountains, 4 copies of Seat of the Synod, and 4 Silver Bluff Bridge. So all the artifact lands that are in the Izzet colors. So all the red and blue artifact lands, which is going to be pretty necessary when you're running Koldatha Rebirth, as you're going to need to make sure you do have an expendable artifact out to sacrifice it. Sometimes that's your land, sometimes that's your Ichor Wellspring or your Chromatic Star. And in their sideboard, they brought 1 copy of Blue Elemental Blast, 2 Cast in the Fire, 1 Flaring Pain, 1 Goblin War Strike, 3 copies of Hydroblast. Well, that's interesting. Why are they running Hydroblast and just not more Blue Elemental Blast? Well, I guess one thing is that this is a deck being played in paper, so sometimes you'll see this because these are the cards that they physically own, and essentially they do the same thing. And they got 2 copies of Pyroblast and 1 Red Elemental Blast. And then 3 copies of Relic of Progenitus and 1 Weather the Storm, as they can get probably a pretty high storm count once they get their cost reduction out and they have a bunch of goblins. They can make a lot of mana, and then especially with things like mana morphos, they can easily make a mana of any color, as well as their chromatic, sacrificing their chromatic star. So Weather the Storm is definitely, if you can get a pretty high storm count with your deck, it's pretty much almost an auto include. And for this janky brew, it is pretty expensive for a pauper deck, around $117 according to the prices on Moxfield. I think they're using card market prices, so it might be a little bit higher than you could probably build it cheaper with buying off a TCG player, or maybe at, if you have a LGS that sells cheaper cards. Not all of them do. But yeah, it is a pretty wild build. I thought it was really interesting. I do love playing Storm decks, though I haven't really been playing them as much. I recently took apart my Poison Storm deck, as I really don't feel like it is always super good. Sometimes it seems like Storm decks either they do absolutely nothing or they go off like crazy, which is maybe what makes them kind of fun. They're also a little bit more difficult to pilot, definitely not for everyone. Do think this deck is pretty interesting. Love seeing Goblin Electromancer being played in the format, as well as another way to run Meeting of Minds, which is one of my new favorite commons that have been printed in the last year. All right, and the final deck that we are going to be talking about today is a Burn Elemental deck by Lucas Casseri. All right, so let's take a look at what they brought. They brought 4 Bright Hearth Banneret, 4 Cinder Pyromancer, 4 Grinning Ignis, and 4 Smoke Braider. So it's an elemental tribal deck. And Grinning Ignis is kind of crazy to see this year. I don't think I've ever seen this card being played in Pauper. It's a very fun card to build a infinite combo around, which is exactly what this deck is doing, which is pretty wild. So let's take a look at what else they brought. They brought 1 copy of Faithless Looting, 4 Reckless Impulse, 4 Rite of Flame, and 4 Ren's Resolve. So they're doing the whole 8 rec package, along with some fast mana in Rite of Flame. All right, and then in their instant pile, they got 1 Apostle's Blessing, which is a really great protection spell and can basically be played in any any deck, since all you need is 1 generic mana and 2 life to cast it. 3 copies of Lightning Bolt. They brought in 4 Energy Refractor, which this is one of the big parts of their combo. So essentially, it is a 4 card combo with Energy Refractor, Grinning Ignis, and Bright Hearth Banneret. So what you can do with those, and you'll need 2 Bright Hearth Bannerets to pull this off. So you'll need 2 Bright Hearth Bannerets and 1 Grinning Ignis, and then a Energy Refractor. And basically what you can do is create infinite storm count and infinite ETB triggers. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do with that. You could kill with their Cinder Pyromancer, or you can kill with the enchantment that they brought, which is Impact Tremors. So that deals a damage every time a creature enters the battlefield. So yes, this is an infinite combo deck in basically mono red, which is pretty wild. Kind of surprised they're not splashing green here for Weather the Storm, as that seems like a really good card that you could use in the deck. To basically make it so your opponents can't win. A lot of decks are not going to be able to deal with someone who just gained infinite life. All right, but let's take a look at their mana base. It's a 19 land build. They got 2 Forgotten Caves and 17 mountains. In their sideboard, they brought in 1 Ancient Grudge, 3 more Apostles' Blessings. It was probably really good to bring up against any control decks. 4 copies of Ignite Chewer. This basically they can deal with artifacts this way as well as it's an elemental, so its cost does get reduced. You can also use your smoke abrader to use some more fast mana in order to cast it if you just want to hard cast it instead of using the evoke side. Also got 4 copies of Red Elemental Blast and 3 copies of Shields of Velis Vel. Oh yeah, it's a very, very interesting deck. Mono red is definitely not a color that I would think of when I'm thinking of a combo deck. Generally, I'm thinking, okay, this is a burn deck, or this is the color where you play burn or you play aggro, like you play very aggressively. Or sometimes, there is a bit of a big red deck in terms of mono red Tron. But yeah, definitely not a color that I would be thinking of for a infinite combo deck. But that is exactly what this deck is, and I honestly love it. Love seeing someone trying to make Grinning Ignis work in Pauper. Think that is really, really awesome. I think this, though, one thing I would say is that I don't think that this deck is quite there yet. That has a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of ways that they could push this. I think splashing green is gonna be really what does it. I think Weather the Storm needs to be in this deck just to make it so that you're able to make your opponent just scoop, because most people will do that. They will just scoop when you gain infinite life, because though you do need 4 cards to essentially create your combo of, your infinite Stormcloud, your infinite ETBs, you'll need that 5th card, either that Cinder Pyromancer or um, your Impact Tremors, in order to actually win the game that way. Because you can't actually win. So I think it needs another way to essentially create a situation where your opponent cannot win, or where you can just win the game. Usually, it's them scooping to the fact that you have now created a 1 billion storm count and have copied Weather the Storm 1 billion times. Like, most of the decks, unless they are, maybe Turbo Fog or some other infinite combo deck, they're not really going to have an answer to what just happened. But still, it is a very interesting deck. Really love seeing Grinning Ignis being played. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys. Very interested to know what you think of the decks that we went over today. Are there any that you are interested in trying out, or ways that you would maybe change them? Things you would add to their sideboards into the main board. Very interested to hear what you think of them. As always, guys, I hope you all are having a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time.